The Carlton Football Club. They bloody did it again. 3 times they've led at halftime, 3 times they haven't trailed at three-quarter time, and 3 times they've picked up the L. The most frightening part about all this, in 3 games they've been outscored 24 goals to 8 in second halves. All 3 games have consisted of chokes, fall-offs, whatever you want to call it. But let's decipher why it occurred in this game specifically. Carlton led 27-4 at quarter time. The earlier portion of the game consisted of a number of game-altering statistics. A Bulldogs pressure rating of 150, and a horrid kicking efficiency in comparison to the Blues, who transitioned the ball well from D50, with a strong kick mark play-on game, to end up collecting more uncontested inside 50 marks in one quarter than they did in the entirety of last week's game. The most staggering element of all this, all 4 goals came from turnover in the first quarter. Does this indicate the Bulldogs simply starting slowly? Or does this indicate a stronger executing Carlton team, skill-wise? I'd say both. The Bulldogs were highly wasteful entering their forward 50, and it was the Blues absorbing the pressure. In my view, the game being played majorly in the Dogs' forward half actually optimised Carlton's play. The Bulldogs had all their defensive 50 chains in the opening quarter intercepted, indicating a struggle to transition the ball. This meant that with most Dogs entries, Carlton could clog their defensive 50, apply a high level of defensive pressure, and it allowed targets like Sam Darcy to be negated with all that aerial competition. It allowed Carlton to play into a much more open forward half as they worked from back to front. They actually did utilise a kick on the 45 this week early on, a lot of shorter passes, and they used width more effectively, holding possession 48% of the time and going against their traditional method of going forward in a long, slow, and straight manner. For Carlton's second goal, you're seeing the play start off with a clearance not actually being effective, which outside of the second quarter was reflective of Carlton's game. Carlton's defending here is quite disappointing on multiple occasions, with roll-up defense not being impactful, and a lack of handover, and also massive gaps in their zone. But the Bulldogs butcher multiple opportunities in a Carlton-esque fashion, through poor execution and a lack of positive decision-making. A hospital handball like this manufactures pressure, and it plays into the Carlton collapse with Cottrell, Hewitt and Hollands working cohesively to ensure an overcooked handball. Now this frees up the Blues. De Koning works as a decoy to free up the space for Williams to carry the ball. And this is something Carlton don't do enough. Their disposal usually isn't good enough. And so to need to fall back on it closer to your back 50, that doesn't give us a sniff scoring-wise. God, it's so much easier when your option is right in front of you and the space is presentable. The execution of this kick is a prime example of common sense and good decision-making from all parties. Carlton running end-to-end, that places less strain on the disposal, and there's a lot of space to work with. Now, after the Bulldogs butcher a kick inside 50 a little later on, Carlton's defensive positioning is established. And while the Dogs create a re-entry, it allows Carlton's tools to plug the opening and completely remove Sam Darcy as an influence because of all this traffic and one-dimensional long ball play. And then you've got a mixture of Carlton using a few short kicks to let the play spread a little bit, all the whilst now the Bulldogs aren't on the ball defensively. Carlton's little extra ground gain from those short 45s means a kick with penetration can reach Fogarty, who has snuck behind the zone. And with that urgency to run back, Oscar Baker, who initially was on Lockie Fogarty, a part of a failed handover, now leaves Cripps, who receives a handball. And that bit of punch you get from this flow and ball movement means the man playing in front is rendered a non-impact. It takes one thing for the opposition to have a lapse, but it also is another thing to work hard, honour the man running past, take on the risky kick, and that's what was done in this sequence. Carlton worked their way out of the back 50 well with short passing as we've seen, and passing that stretched the Bulldogs zone, drew numbers in, and allowed Carlton to slowly bring their last line further forward. In doing so effectively, this played into their control-styled game and allowed for Carlton to gain more meterage. Matt Cottrell was one who profited off of getting into these wider positions with Carlton switching the ball regularly. The key thing to note, the first quarter exuded a team that did look fresh, looked sharp, looked energetic, so much so they could apply pressure. They possessed the work rate and stamina to spread in general play and from kick-ins, win these 50-50 contests, and counteract rapidly. And in looking like the superior side, their decision-making also had its ceiling elevated. The Bulldogs had a case of Carlton, but Carlton were good enough to take advantage. To summarise what followed after quarter time, Carlton won the inside 50 count in the middle 2 quarters, however became more handball heavy, their disposal efficiency lowered, and they got smashed for uncontested ball. As the game wore on, they lost time in possession, with the Bulldogs lifting pressure-wise, lacked control when it came to their marking, and all these things strongly correlated with a lack of composure and the excessive scoring from turnover by the Bulldogs in half 2. Carlton got goals in the second quarter from centre bounce, but that became unsustainable, and Carlton's scoring generation from general play, straight donuts. That aside, Carlton's entire game was dependent on turnover, so the minute it became stoppage heavy, this played into the lap of the Bulldogs. Carlton were getting worked into the ground and, for the most part, not getting much bang for buck. Carlton, in a baffling statistic, rotationally, had 12 rotations remaining by the end of the game, 10 more than the Dogs. So when the fourth quarter came round, Carlton were out on their feet and had their backs to the wall. For a team needing to reach the heights of the first quarter in order to close out the game, and that being dependent on a strong endurance base, this was, as I said, baffling. Here's a few examples where that fatigue was showcased. Well, first and foremost, the kick-ins. You compare the dynamics side by side, and it's like I'm getting as much motion from a painting almost in the centre corridor. We're a minute and a half into the fourth quarter. You look upfield, there's nothing. You accelerate to when it fortuitously ends up with Hollands, who is following up on his initial kick. There's still nothing on offer. I mean, there's nothing more one-dimensional than having one option. 25 seconds or so later, the Blues get a reprieve from what would have been a sequence to tie the game, and so a rest for 3.5 minutes follows. But the same stagnancy occurs again, with everyone shoved onto one side. Saad is trying to attack the open side and utilise the space, but there's literally one option in about 80 metres in the direction he's running. This results in the ball remaining in the Bulldogs' half. Other reasons for it being Dogs' half heavy in the fourth quarter, mark taken by McGovern and a simple short 45 kick, well, now it's not a viable option all of a sudden. Nick Haynes does this later in the game as well when we're hanging onto the lead with a little over 5 minutes to play. The stoppage following an interception resulting from this, the Bulldogs have 5 numbers goal side to attack the forward 50, and then the play after that, Carlton are hack kicking out of their back 50 again as opposed to running the ball out. Presumably now lacking the legs to have that explosive burst, and almost trying to buy themselves time to catch their breath, even though the repeat entries from these back 50 exits is ensuring that isn't the case. And the Dogs get a forward 50 free kick on the re-entry. What happens in the Nick Haynes instance, you may ask? They take a mark inside forward 50 with the ball remaining in the forward half off a contest on the centre wing. The Blues gave away a free kick. A 15-metre kick on the 45, it could help you access a switch. Get it deeper down the line. The Bulldogs have to chain it further to reach the goal. You can get more players behind the ball as well, and still have the capacity to get forward. But it seems like the Blues were going with the more conservative strategy, energy-wise and game style-wise. And I think this was the killer blow. Carlton work their backside off to force the turnover, and given the Bulldogs ran into the open side, Carlton heading back up the line just as quickly can attack real estate of a similar nature. This kick right here, as Carlton work it upfield efficiently, puts killer in killer blow. Especially given Carlton could have gone with the grain of Doherty's initial diagonal ball. At the start of this sequence, Blake Acres on defensive side of the stoppage has just gut ran from one end to the other while gassed. Now by the time Carlton get to the other end, Acres isn't even in frame. He's still getting back to centre wing. Chera now is caught reeling, having not been used on the transition. Sam Walsh got sucked into the contest, and he's just left a man open on the paint, and Akers in all of this is now chasing a guy who's been on the field 5 minutes. A team looking devoid of energy, working themselves into the ground because of simple BS like this. I'm seeing tackles being broken, I'm seeing a lack of explosiveness and tiredness leading to rushed kicks. Now, the writing was on the wall after Carlton fell behind with 4 minutes to go. The Bulldogs take a mark off a clearance, and the man who ends up kicking from the centre clearance ends up burning Cripps, working into the space to get a deeper forward 50 entry. Here's where it's blatantly clear how cooked Carlton were, situation-wise and stamina-wise. Bailey Dale has closed down the kick with conviction. Hollands has waited. De Koning and Cripps borderline walking. The ball gets hit to them, and they're sitting out on the edge of the contest and might as well not even be there. Then McGovern falls into a heap with his legs crumbling as he tries to spoil while a Bulldog remains standing. And so, yes, Carlton were in the contest right until the very end, though a methodical and powerful start was countered with a disjointed, lethargic end. The frustration arises when this feels like it was Carlton's best chance to win thus far, but I get the impression their fitness let them down. The tiredness definitely ensured anything reminiscent of the first quarter would be a far cry, as the poor elements of their game streamed in, and the tiredness enabled that. Sure, the Bulldogs lifted themselves and ensured Carlton strayed away from their stress-free first quarter, first half even. But goodness me, it really feels like Carlton are victims of their own demise. Not only in a game like this, not only in every game this season, but almost for the last 2 or 3 seasons, they've developed this sort of reputation. What do you think? Was it fatigue? Was this different to the games prior? Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to what the next Carlton analysis brings. But until then, bye for now.